guys for hanging out with us today in this amazing virtual mastermind. If you've been in our virtual masterminds before, you know that we start them at 11 and we end them at noon. We want to make sure that this is just a taste of what you can see. My name is Sarah Rodriguez. For those that don't know me, I am CEO and counsel for Titan Title. We do operate in Virginia, Maryland, DC, and Florida, and we are incredibly excited today for this amazing presentation by my friend, Mr. Charlie. Charlie is not only an incredible, charismatic, and wonderful person, but he has over 20 years of real estate experience. He's particularly skilled in structuring and negotiating win-win solutions for distressed sales. And what I like the most is that not only is he incredible about creating wealth in real estate for himself, but also for others. So I think today we are very blessed to have him speaking on how do you create your own pre-foreclosure list and master the art of marketing to this valuable audience. So Mr. Charlie, go ahead. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much for having me. And I'll go ahead and share my screen. We can see it okay? You guys see it okay? All right. First of all, I want to thank Sarah with Titan Title for having me on this, having me on today. And I also want to welcome all you guys to this presentation. Especially, I see a lot of folks out there that, you know, we've lent money to in the past as far as Clear Sky Financial is concerned. So I want to welcome you guys. And also, this presentation is for you. It's not for me. I already know all this stuff. And so if there's a particular slide that you might have a question on, go ahead and ask me while the slide's up so that you guys have on the top of your mind. I know I'll try and save time for more questions towards the end, but I happen to be a blabberwalkie, and so I'll try and cover all this material in about 45 minutes. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do it. The title is How to Find and Buy Pre-Foreclosures. And so if you're not here for this, you're in the wrong place. This is something that we've created. We wrote a book called The Roadmap to Wealth in Real Estate Investing. And basically what we've done is we've created this roadmap to get you to passive income. And what it does is it gives you the education on the foundation of real estate investing. It gives you financial literacy of real estate investing, teaches you how to find distressed assets, teaches you how to find the money, create your capital stack via either wholesaling or flipping, build your rental portfolio, or become a hard money lender, or invest in, you know, pooled mortgage funds to develop your passive income. And where we are today is we're actually at this red dot. You guys see the red car right there under finding distressed assets? That's where we are on the roadmap, but we're only at a very small portion of that. We cover a bunch of ways to find distressed assets, but we're right here on the roadmap itself. For those of you who do not know me, this is who I am. I've been involved 25 years in real estate investing. We started out as regular licensed agents. I actually co-own a brokerage, but I'm not a broker. I'm just a normal Virginia licensed agent. But we've been in the investing space for over 20 years. I own a bunch of companies. I'll explain that on the next slide. But one of the things, if you guys don't take anything out of this, I like to give back. I've got two charities that I run. Catholics for Housing is one of them. It's a low-income housing charity that I've been a part of for about 12 years. So we have a lot of low-income housing assets in our portfolio. I'm also part of this thing called Clear Sky Sports Angels. I give money to disadvantaged youth to allow them to participate in sports, especially whether it's AAU basketball or travel soccer. So we're in the process of creating a foundation to fund all of those kids in their, you know, youthful endeavors, especially the ones that have a social injustice that can't participate in these sports, but that need to. And so that's basically who I am. My Instagram is at Charlie Einsmann. LinkedIn is Charlie Einsmann. So give me a quick follow. There's a lot of free investing advice on there as well. Here's the list of our companies. Basically, we have a 5-pronged business model. Number one, we fix and flip houses. I used to do 3 or 4 a month. Now we're down to maybe 1 a month just because of COVID and the fact that we're focused more on the hard money side. The second prong of our business model is we have a residential rental portfolio of houses that we've had for a long time. And so we pretty much manage our own properties. We have some commercial assets, business line number 3. Business line number 4 is we do what's called tax lien certificate investing. And then business line number 5 is that we have a hard money company called Clear Sky Financial. Now, if it wasn't for distressed assets, we would have never been able to create our wealth. It has all come from pre-foreclosures and foreclosures. And so we're experts in that field. I've been doing it for over 20 years. And so this presentation is basically going to be on how to find pre-foreclosures. We just recently wrote a book called The Roadmap to Wealth. We're pretty proud of it. Hit the #1 bestseller list on Amazon, a couple of categories. Okay, let's get into it. Keys to success. The reason why I do this slide is because the #1 reason for why people do not succeed in real estate investing is because they do not know how to find distressed assets. It's all about buying into equity, buying distressed assets, whether you're going to fix and flip, whether you're going to wholesale, or whether you're just going to keep them as a buy and hold rental. And so these are the various keys to success in this. #1, perseverance. I can't tell you how many times we've been turned down. Each 100 properties that I look at, I might get 1 or 2. So it's definitely a numbers game. Create good habits. Create your own niche market, right? For us, our market was always Northern Virginia. It was always certain subdevelopment classes, maybe neighborhoods that were built 1980 and before, single family homes, townhouses. So we've always had our niche market. But as our businesses have grown, we sort of expanded from the Northern Virginia area to Maryland and DC. But so understand your competition, right? Everybody on this call, I hate to say it, if you're fixing and flipping or if you're wholesaling, you're each other's competition. So I'll tell you a couple pointers on how to separate yourself from the competition. Cultivate your own marketplace. I say stay away from the lemmings. What I mean by that is a lot of investors, what they try and do is they try and buy lists. They try and buy out-of-towner lists. They try and buy pre-foreclosure lists. They try and buy estate homes. And that's not really the way to go because everybody else is buying the same lists. So the question behind that is why would you buy the same lists that they're selling to hundreds of other investors? So we believe in that you need to create your own marketplace. And just important, you have to know your numbers, right? ARV, if you guys don't know what that is, it's after repair value. You've got to know your renovation expenses. And if you're a fix it and flipper or if you're wholesaling, you still have got to know those top 2 numbers. The next thing you've got to understand, especially if you're a fix and flipper, is your buying and selling closing costs. And then you've got to understand your holding costs. So you really have got to understand all of the numbers before you enter into a deal to purchase. Liquidity. Why am I talking about this? It'll be very obvious here pretty soon. But one of the things that you have to do is when you're buying pre-foreclosures, you have to understand the available to get cash quickly as possible, right? Most of our best pre-foreclosure purchases have been deals that I've closed in 48 hours or less, or a week or less, because what's going on a pre-foreclosure is that there's an auction date behind that house. And so we're against the timeline. So you really have got to be able to execute your deal as soon as you can. And you might not be able to have access to a hard money lender who can close in 2 days. So then what you need to do is you need to understand your liquidity, right? And so what liquidity is, it's the cash on hand that you have, plus any home equity lines of credit, plus any credit card availability, plus any other bank relationships. And what you do is you figure out what your liquidity is, do it on a quarterly basis, do it on a monthly basis. One of my first pre-foreclosure buys, and it's in the book that I ever did, and I still own this townhouse to this day, is I basically purchased my pre-foreclosure with credit cards. So back in the day where they were having the gold cards, I had about, 15 or 20 credit cards with, $20,000, $30,000 gold card limits. And so I had about $300,000 in gold card availability. Now, it did cost me 3% to draw cash advance on it, but it didn't really matter because I was buying my first house at such a good deal. So that's one of the strategies that I used when I was younger, when I didn't have much money, but I had a good job and I had good credit. So I had a lot of credit lines available to my use, and I actually used those for my first pre-foreclosure purchase. So just remember, keep track of your liquidity. Remember, cash is king, right? Anonymous investor said this: if you don't do the time, you'll not make a dime. That's me. And so in this game, especially the pre-foreclosure game or the distress asset game, you've got to spend a lot of time doing it. Especially if you have limited deal flow or if you don't have that much deal flow, you've got to spend your time 2 ways. #1, you got to spend it getting educated. And #2, you got to spend your time marketing for deals. whether you chase them or whether you create a mechanism where deals come to you. Distress assets, what's the definition? Usually it's a distress asset is one in which is in major financial difficulty. I'm going to cover that today in the pre-foreclosure realm, but it could also be a conditional distress, and it could also be an emotional distress. So there's three different ways that an asset is in distress, and sometimes there could be 2 out of 3, 3 out of 3. But for today, we're going to cover pre-foreclosures, which is more in the financial distress realm. Distress assets, it causes the asset to greatly devalue, right? Usually conditional, might be vacant, it might be blighted. You know, there might be, you know, somebody's been living there for 30 years, they own a hoarder home. And so it just, you know, what it does is just devalues the asset. And again, distress can be a good opportunity to buy if the investor can overcome the difficulties. And I'll cover that here in another chart. Now, what this is the distress asset types for purchase. Remember, I said earlier, I'm only covering one of 9 categories that we cover and pre-foreclosures, and I have it highlighted. We are doing another mastermind class for 3 hours in person on July the 18th, and that's going to cover all of these 9 different categories. And one of the things that I want to explain is that when you're dealing with a pre-foreclosure, the way the property goes, the timeline is this. An ad is put in the paper or online. That becomes a pre-foreclosure. A courthouse auction is set, right? And usually the ads are placed about 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks before the actual public sale. And so the public sale is noticed. So let's say I have an auction on July the 10th at 2 o'clock. Once July the 10th at 2 o'clock happens, that's the actual physical auction date, right? That's the timeline we're up against when buying pre-foreclosures. At that point in time, it becomes a pre-foreclosure. It becomes a foreclosure. It is no longer a pre-foreclosure. What I am talking about is I am talking about the houses that come to sale before the auction date. These are houses that you need to track and houses that you need to market to. Then what happens is at the foreclosure auction, one of 2 things happen. The bank is going to specify an opening bid, and either it goes to a third-party sale or it goes back to the bank. That's considered REOs, real estate owned. So 1, 2, and 3, that's basically the chronology of a distress asset in the pre-foreclosure realm. So it's very, very important that you understand how it goes. But then what happens is once you're tracking a pre-foreclosure, right, and the auction gets canceled. Well, there's many reasons why an auction could get canceled. Number 1, they could have filed bankruptcy. Number 2, they could have brought the loan current. Number 3, maybe they did sell the house. Number 4, maybe this is the first time they went to, a foreclosure. They called the substitute trustee. They canceled the sale. Number 5, they could have done a loan modification. So there's many, many ways why the auction could get canceled. Once the auction's canceled and you've already noticed it as a good pre-foreclosure candidate with equity, then what you want to do is add it to your pre-foreclosure list and market to those properties into the future. Because usually folks that go to foreclosure, I see them come again, time and time again. So they become what I call repeat offenders. Okay, and so what I'm going to cover on the pre-foreclosure is pretty simple. I'm going to cover the definition. I'm going to cover how you find them, because that's why we're all here. And then I'll cover a couple of deal examples that we've recently done so that you guys can understand how we did it. Okay, pre-foreclosure, what is it? It's a house that's behind on their payments. Now, I've got 3 to 9 months, but because of COVID, there's some folks out there that are 2 or 3 years behind. So there was a lot of COVID moratoriums on the foreclosure sales, and a lot of folks got behind on their sales. A lot of folks did loan modifications or they did forbearances. So even though I say 3 to 9 months, it could be longer because of COVID. And those guys are still working their way through the foreclosure system. When a house is being foreclosed on, right? Back in the day, there used to be something called an NOD, called a notice of default. Not so much anymore. In Virginia, there's what's called a substitute trustee filing in the courthouse steps, but sometimes law firms will file those notices maybe a week or 2 before the auction. But in all jurisdictions, okay, whether it's a sheriff state, a mortgage state, or a deed of trust state, an ad is placed in a public newspaper that describes the foreclosure. Usually it describes, it's always going to describe the foreclosing instrument number. It's going to have a date of sale and a time. It's going to have a location. It's going to have your earnest money deposit, or your deposit that you need to bring to the court in the form of a cashier check. It's going to have all these details with the foreclosure sale, right? And so that's usually in a newspaper. Now you can also find these ads online as well, depending upon which jurisdiction you're in. In Virginia, there's a website called publicnoticesvirginia.com that has most of these ads. All depend upon if you're in Florida. I'm not exactly sure where to find them online, but a newspaper is a good way to find a sheriff sale in Florida. And then what you need to do, also too, there's these substitute trustee filings in the courthouse land records. I'll show you an example of one in Virginia, what it looks like. And I'm going to show you an example of a bunch of ads and how to identify a pre-foreclosure. And then what you need to do is you go through an ID process to determine which house have equity in them and which house is on the list for a pre-foreclosure. Now, if you're a real estate agent and you can still do pre-foreclosures from a realtor agent standpoint, but sometimes the encumbrance against the house might be more than what the house is worth. So then if you're an agent, what you want to do is attack the pre-foreclosures from a short sale listing standpoint. I know short sale listings aren't very prevalent in Northern Virginia, but there are short sale listings in Maryland and DC because they're starting to come to fruition because the market has declined in some of those areas, especially in Washington, DC, where market is off about 15 to 20% in certain areas because of crime and because of rising interest rates. So short sales are coming back. But a lot of times what we're trying to do is we're going to ID the pre-foreclosures from an equity standpoint, and those are the ones that we're going to focus on. And then once the ad is out, send a letter, postcard, or simply drop off a brochure at the house. In Maryland, it's a little bit different because of certain laws. So be familiar with the laws in Maryland as far as predatory stopping by in somebody's house. They do have laws. In Virginia, there's no laws. And so if a house is going to foreclosure, just simply create a brochure and tape it to the door and knock on the door. We've been doing that for years. On a pre-foreclosure, though, it's very important that you understand that you're purchasing the house directly through the owner. And so what that means is all liens, encumbrances come into play.
That's next week. Yeah, I'm here
If you're
next
buying
week.
a house at a foreclosure sale, then you have to understand which lien is being foreclosed on because all the junior liens get blown away. And that's, like I said, title, other liens are important. They all come into play and you must close very fast, sometimes within 2 to 3 days, which is why I talked about liquidity and how to understand your liquidity. Now, hard money lenders, because there's so many hard money lenders, they can help you out with the liquidity. But the key to the hard money lender is that sometimes they got to be able to close in a week or less. Okay, now, when you're dealing with pre-foreclosures, one of the things that you have to understand is that the financial distress of the house, that might be the main problem, but there's usually a lot of other problems that go with the house, okay? A lot of times, folks are going to need to help. You might need to help them find a place to live, right? Because they are going to get foreclosed on. They might get evicted from their house. So they're going to need a new place to live. And so you're going to have to figure that out and help them out. You might need to help move them. You might need to get a storage unit for them. You might need to, help them with movers. You might need to help with the trash out. They might have a child. Let's say you're buying a house in May or June, or I'm sorry, April. They might have a child that's either graduating or they want to wait for school to be over. They might need to give you you might need to give them a 60 or 90 day, free rent back as part of the deal. So what you're doing is when you're sitting in the living room and talking to this person on the phone, is you need to understand all of their problems, and you got to have a solution for all the problems, because what you're going to understand is that even though the house is one of their problems, odds are they have other problems too that might need to be resolved. So just be cognizant of that fact, that you are a problem solver and that you need to deal with a bunch of different problems dealing with that occupant or the home seller of that house. Okay, purchase steps. It's very simple, but it's very hard. This is not an easy business. I have to tell you that over and over again. Number one, what do? You identify it. What does a pre-foreclosure look like? I'm gonna explain that to you in a second. Number two, market directly to the owners before the foreclosure auction date. Okay, either send them a mailer. I wouldn't recommend that. Try and I do an email campaign all the time to pre-foreclosures. It has a 1 in 100 land rate, but that's okay. But you got to have different marketing strategies. Now, what happens is once one of your marketing strategies works and you get a phone call from the owner, number one, you have got to answer the phone, because I can't tell you that that might be your only chance to set an appointment with that homeowner. And so please answer your phone. Don't, do the best you can. I know sometimes it goes to voicemail, but if you can't answer your phone and they want to talk to you, the principal, they don't want to talk to a VA. Trust me. And then once you set the appointment, the next thing you have to do is you have to understand the title. And so there's two ways to do it, right? And this is what Titan Title, Sarah can help you out. You need to have a title company relationship who's an investor-friendly title company who can get you a title abstract fairly quick. Okay. If you do not have that relationship, then you're going to have to learn via hopefully an expert to help you learn how to do your own title searches. I do my own title searches all across Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C., just because I want to get an idea of the encumbrance. And the reason behind that is that I might get a phone call from a pre-foreclosure candidate on Friday at 5 o'clock when most title companies are closed. And I might set an appointment for Saturday morning or Sunday. And so you cannot have a title company do a title search for you on a weekend or on a Friday night. That just isn't going to work. Unless, of course, you have a different kind of relationship with them. Maybe you've done many deals with them, but just keep that in mind. And that's why, there's two ways. Just do a title company, get a title company relationship, do a self search. Now, these title companies are not pulling their abstracts for free. So let's say you have a pre-foreclosure deal, they pull a title for you, and the deal doesn't go for whatever reason. Well, you're still going to get charged 100, 150 bucks. So just keep that in mind and keep them, make sure they get paid as well. And then what happens is once you have the title abstract back and you know the encumbrances, you meet with the home seller and you go over all this information that you've acquired. Now, sometimes we've met home sellers that we haven't had time to pull the title search. Then what you need to do is just build a trust relationship with them and have them talk to you about their encumbrances and what they owe against the house. And then once you know that, it's very, very important that you create a win-win offer based on the title search. Do not take advantage of them because they're already in financial distress. They're probably already in emotional distress, right? So don't take advantage of them. Make sure you create a win-win offer. There's never been a time that we've taken advantage of a homeowner. We didn't make sure that they walked out of that closing with $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 in cash. You always got to make the incentive for them to sell it to you. Just don't take advantage of the situation and just buy the house for the encumbrances. So create that win-win. And then what you need to do is obviously close the deal, right? So hopefully the title company has already pulled the abstract for you. You know when the foreclosure date is. Let's say if it's a July the 10th. If it's a July the 10th auction date, you're going to need to close that deal at least by July the 8th, because you're going to need to give time for the title company to record the deeds of trust, mortgages, whatever they're recording, get the money wired out to the law firm, which is called the substitute trustee, get them paid off and get that auction canceled. So my rule of thumb is usually have these deals close 2 days before the actual auction date. Now, you can close them the morning before the auction date, provided the auction is, let's say, in the afternoon. But you've got to be very cognizant of when that auction date is, because that is the timeline that we have that we got to close by. Okay, now, what you have to see at bottom, I have another number one. It's not a typo. Then what happens is if you got this pre-foreclosure candidate, you've got them ID'd, right? Then let's say the auction gets canceled. The only way for you to really know the auction's canceled is if you show up to the auction, or if you have some people that show up to the county steps that can tell you that, or if you're following a website, maybe it falls off the substitute trustee website or the law firm website. That's how you know it's got canceled. So then what happens is once the auction gets canceled, you need to add that to your ongoing marketing list. And I'll show you what a marketing list looks like later on in this presentation, because I've got about 1,500 on my marketing list that I've been collecting for since 2009, I believe. Danica will know the answer to that. So we've been collecting these things for about 15 years. And oh, by the way, there is not one list source provider that has the same list that I have. There is not one other investor competition that has the same list that I do, because I have created my own list. I've created my own data. I market to my own data. I don't buy lists. I just create them. So keep that in mind. Okay. Here's an example of what's called a substitute trustee filing. And this came from, I don't even know, this is Loudoun County. Okay. And what this is this is recorded in the public land records. And I'll go over the second way of identifying what it looks like in a second. So what this is this recorded in the public land records. It's a property. instrument number in there. It's got the debt in there. I don't know if this one actually has the address. Oh yeah, here it is. Wait a minute. I don't know that it actually has the address, but this is what a substitute trustee filing looks like so that you can identify it in the public land records. That gives you an idea of a property going to foreclosure. Okay. The next way that you want to look at these guys is that these are, I'm serious, guys. You're going to laugh your heads off. I'm an old timer, but these are actual ads in a newspaper. You guys know what a newspaper is? Well, these are actually ads in illegal section. Remember, in Virginia, public notices, virginia.com will give you all the ads too. And so one of the ways that we want to do is now we're in the identification process of what's a pre-foreclosure and what's not. So I've got 3 ads here that we're looking at, right? And these are 3 different houses that are going to foreclosure. And so one of the things that you got to realize is that this is back about 8 years ago. So I want to explain to you what's going on 8 years ago. In that, especially in the 2006, 2005 timeframe, what has happened is that in that time period, we went through a huge pricing correction in Northern Virginia. And so in 2007 and 8, the prices absolutely crashed. In some areas, it was divided by 2. In other areas, properties went from 400,000 to 125,000. So we had a huge price correction between 2007 and 2008 in Prince William County. It's very, very important that you understand that when I explain how to identify a pre-foreclosure. Okay, the first ad, 15223 Jeans Court, Woodbridge, Virginia. Remember, the foreclosing deed of trust was 2005, $485,000. Well, the auction was 2016. At that point in time, the market hadn't gone up yet, right? So in this particular case, this 485 happened to be it was a loan amount of, the house wasn't worth that much. The house might have been worth 450 to 500,000. So the house at this point in time was over encumbered. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's not a pre-foreclosure candidate. The ad to the far right, 12612 Crabtree Falls Drive. Here's why there's 2 reasons why this isn't a pre-foreclosure candidate. It was originated in 2005, 575, but at the very top of the ad, there's sold subject to a 120-day right of redemption by the IRS. So this told me all I needed to know about this ad. Number 1, it was over encumbered by the 575. Number 2, they also had federal IRS tax liens. So that is not a candidate. So 2 out of 3 ads, these are not pre-foreclosure candidates. Now the ad in the middle, that is a pre-foreclosure candidate. Let me tell you why. The deed of trust, in this particular case, 2016, the deed of trust was 13 years prior. The instrument number is 2003-08-2901-59927. Now, what you have to realize is down in the terms of sale, it says a non-refundable bidder's deposit of $12,500. Okay, what that tells me is because it's by Brock and Scott, the lien amount they owed maybe $125,000. Okay, this was a townhouse in Manassas. I don't remember what it was worth. Maybe at the time $250,000. And so this was a pre-foreclosure candidate. Okay. So you guys understand how we're just at this point, we're just identifying pre-foreclosures. You guys following that? Yeah. What time is it? 11:30. I'm about halfway through. Do you guys have any questions at this juncture?
Let's keep going, Charlie. I think everybody's furiously taking notes. Please note that the slides will not be shared, but this is being recorded. We can share that. So please make sure you're making notes.
Sounds good. All right.
Thank you, Charlie.
Let's keep going. Okay. So what I like to do anytime I give a presentation, and so I'm going to show a deal that we did back in 2016, but I'm also going to show a deal that we did in 2023. So anytime I do these presentations, I have to give you the property address. Because one of the things for us is that I want you guys, if you want to do it, look up the addresses, look up what we did so that you can further understand it. So I'm going to cover 2 deal examples, and these are live deals that we bought under the company called Clear Sky Properties. And so I'll cover it specifically. So what happened was this property, China Grove Court, keep that in mind. It had a May 4th, 2016 auction date. So remember, I identified that as a pre-foreclosure candidate. And so what I did is I just dropped off a pre-foreclosure brochure at the house. You know, we have a brochure that we've been using for years. It's called 3 Ways to Get Out of Financial Distress. Number one was we'll help you maybe put a second trust in their house, bring it current, that kind of thing. Number two was we were agents at the time. Well, I still am an agent. Sam's on here. He's the broker of the company, but we would say we can list your house for you, pre-foreclosure, sell on the normal market. And then the third option was we'll give you $1,000 with a contract for us to buy your house. And so we had 3 options with our brochure. I just knocked on the door. If they weren't there, I just taped it to the door. And then what happened is a few days before the actual auction itself, the owner called me up. Matter of fact, she called on a Friday or something, either Thursday or Friday. And so I ended up, in this case, set the appointment on the weekend. And so what happened is I didn't have the luxury to have a title company do the title search. I had to do it myself, and I've got the title search for you guys in another slide so you can look at it. And so what I had to do is I had to understand all the encumbrances before we set the meeting. Sam, I don't remember. I think we set the meeting Sunday at 2 o'clock or something like that, and the foreclosure was like Wednesday.
Oh yeah, we
And
ran
so
out there fast.
Yeah, and so we had to really roll out there, but I really had to know the encumbrances. And the reason behind that is because, number one, I'm trying to make a deal with the homeowner right there in person. And number two, just as more importantly, is I need to know the encumbrances so that when we're talking with the homeowner, we can level set and we can build a trusted relationship, because I want them, when I'm talking to them, I want them to tell me everything. I want them to do all the talking, right? I don't want to do that much talking. If I do, I will, but for them, they let me in their house. They were nice enough to call us back, and so I want to get as much information about them as possible, because what I'm doing at that time is I'm building a trust relationship, because they might sell me their house and it might close in 3 days. So we're gonna have to have a trusted relationship. And then I'm gonna need to understand the pathway to occupancy, because obviously if I'm there on a Sunday, we're gonna close on a Tuesday. They're not moving out in 2 days. That is not realistic. So then we're gonna just help them out with occupancy and finding them a place to live. Basically, when you meet the owner, though, you need to have the offer ready, and then you need to have a bunch of letters with you. Now, the letters are, obviously, you guys know what an offer is, right? We use it. I mean, I could use the real estate realtor contract. I only use a 3-page contract. I use a small one. Letters being, you're going to need to know, you're going to need to have a letter for the substitute trustee, which is the law firm foreclosing on the house. You're going to need to have a letter to grant permission for the homeowner to give your information on your behalf. And these include their social security, well, not the social security number, but some last 4 digits of their SSN, their date of birth, and your authorization and their authorization to provide the closing company with information. And so you're going to need to have a bunch of letters. You might need a letter to the HOA to allow them to provide information to you. So you're going to need to have them sign letters as well as the offer package. And so basically we sold this thing. I think we got under contract for $200,000, closed it 2 days later, out sale 285 with 5,500 back. That was the deal itself from a number standpoint. And it needed about $35,000, $40,000 in renovation. And so we probably made about, I don't know, $25,000 to $30,000. So it wasn't bad. And this was back. Okay. What I did before I showed up, I did my own title search. Sarah and team, don't laugh at me. I've got 2 different title searches the way we do it. I've got one on a spreadsheet and I've got one here. But I want to show this to you guys just because I want you to understand what I had to go through, right? And so you have to understand the document type, right? There's 3 different types. There's a deed, trust, SAT, credit line deed of trust, a lien, an assignment, and appointment. So what these different document types are. So they bought the house in January 26th of 2001. I sort of, I didn't include the entire instrument number on here. I just did the date just for simplicity so you guys can see it. They bought it for $160,000. They got a first deed of trust for $163,000. You guys see that? F&M mortgage. On 2003, they refinanced it for $162,510. And I need to know this because I have to understand the encumbrances going in. They satisfied it, SAT, for $163,000. So basically the F&M mortgage comes off the list. They then got a credit line deed of trust for $49,000. They have a couple of HOA liens, Wellington HOA, right? The first deed of trust transferred from BF Saul to Capital One. I think Capital One bought BF Saul. I don't remember back in the day. But then Brock and Scott filed a substitute trustee on the house. That's what APPT stands for, appointment of substitute trustee. So I knew that they were the law firm. But what this is telling me is that the maximum encumbrance, but remember though, the $162,510 was taken out in 2003. So that note was 13 years ago. So odds on that 162 being like 102, very high, or 105. And so that was the case. So my maximum encumbrances was about 110 for the first trust, maybe max on the credit line deed of trust 50. So I'm at 160 plus some HOA stuff. So they were in it for about maybe 165, right? So I kind of knew that going into the appointment. And then we bought it for 200 just because I knew all this stuff, and we pretty much made an agreement in that living room to get under contract, and then I closed it in 2 days. So that's basically what the title search looked like leading into that appointment. All right. That's deal number one. Deal number two that we just recently bought. This was back in last year, 2023. I think we closed it, maybe 2022. But this particular guy, he was getting foreclosed not by the first trust, not by the second trust, but he was getting foreclosed by the homeowners association. He hadn't paid his HOA dues in like 10 years. And so he happened to have two HOAs, right? And so he didn't pay these for 10 years. Well, they finally got it to the foreclosure auction step, and they were gonna foreclose on him April 28, 2023. So they got this thing to the auction date, right? So then what happened was, and so that's kind of what that trustee sale looked like. So you guys can see a different type of a trustee sale and what it looks like in Virginia. Then what happened was, it happened to have been a hoarder home. I got a call from a wholesaler who was one of my bird dogs who had happened to lived in that basement. And so he turned me on to this pre-foreclosure. And so basically the property was a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 3-level townhome. You got the address, so you can look it up. It was a hoarder home. He had 2 HOAs. He was delinquent 10 plus years on both. For whatever reasons, he could not afford to bring those current. So this guy was out of money. He was jobless, out of money. He went through some COVID stresses. You know, again, it was both it was 3 things, right? It was both the conditional distress, it was both the financial distress, and it was both an emotional distress, because once COVID happened, this guy lost his job, couldn't get a job back. And so he was struggling financially, and it needed $100,000 renovation. So this is important for you guys to realize this and understand it, so you understand the whole deal. After fair value was about 675, that was my number on it at the time. And so here, Sarah's going to laugh at me, but here's another way that we pulled title. I pulled this title from Fairfax County land records because I have online access to a lot of them, and I like to do my own thing. You know, sometimes I make a mistake, but not very often, because in this case, this guy had a very strange name. I put it there, and so you guys can see the name, and so it's a lot simpler when the name is not very common. If the name is common, I will not do the title search because it's too difficult for me. Basically went through the same thing. Guy bought it 2003, April 12th, 286. He had a first trust on it. He had his lien started back in 2004, so it might have been a little bit longer, but the lien was released. And so he hadn't started building his back HOA dues. Got another lien in 2006 on the HOA, lien released, but he had many HOA liens from 2007 to 2018. So he was a little bit longer than 10 years late. And so that's how this house came to market. But if you look at the satisfaction on the 27750, that house was refinanced. It was satisfied. He only had a first trust at 360. That was satisfied in 2006. Now he had a first trust at 404 back in 2005, plus all the liens and judgments. So I think his total encumbrances at the time was, I don't know, 380 or 390. I don't remember. And so then what we did is, remember, I got a text, and this is the timeline because this is how fast we had to move. So literally April 14th, I got a text from a referral source living there, owner having an HOA foreclosure. I then went ahead and found the trustee sale ad. I did the title work. 3 days later, I met with the owner on the 21st. Remember, the 28th is when it was scheduled to foreclose, right? So we met with the owner. We agreed to a contract price, 403,500. Remember, the ARV was 675, but it needed every bit of that 100,000. This guy was a hoarder, and plus I had to give him time to move out. So he only owed 240 on the first trust. He owed $40,000 in HOA liens. He owned state income tax liens of 13.6, and then he received about $100,000 at closing. And so if you guys realize, remember, the thing that we talked about earlier is that it's got to be a win-win transaction. And so you got to make sure that these homeowners are walking away with some money, because you got to incentivize them to leave. And a lot of times it's not always the highest price wins. It's always the guys that have a trusted relationship. But in this case, I built the trust. I already had trust from the guy living in the basement. He was a wholesaler, and so he'd been wholesaling properties, and this was his first wholesale deal that he did. So I think we paid him out like $10,000 a wholesale fee. It was either 10 or 15,000. I don't exactly remember. But what we did though is from the time on the 21st that we went under contract, I closed this 6 days later. Okay, and we beat the foreclosure auction date. All right. The results, this is what we bought it for. My final renovation was 100,000, 103,900. So we went about 4% over. That's normal for us. That's okay. Sometimes you want to build in a 10% cushion on the renovation. Put on the MLS, had 4 offers in a week, and that's because of the inventory in Fairfax. So we sold it for $720,000, and we did a 5-month round trip. We made about $160,000. And so that was the second deal on a pre-foreclosure, and this is a more recent one. So what do we do? So what happens if now we have the scenario where the auction has been canceled? Okay, whatever reason. Maybe they brought a current, maybe they modified their loan, maybe they did a loan forbearance, maybe they filed a bankruptcy. There's a lot of different ways to cancel these auctions. So then what we do is, remember, I have a list of pre-foreclosure trustee sales that we go through all the time. Then the auction gets canceled. So what I do is I collect the property address, the date of the foreclosure auction, owner name, owner mailing address, owner contact information, email, phone numbers. I also do a data source flag called pre-4. That's just what I do, because in our distress asset list, I'll have different kinds of data in there. I'll have pre-foreclosures, I have tax lien properties, I have estate homes, I have hidden market, whether it's vacant, blighted. We have a lot of different things going into that list. So I want to understand how my list got sourced. But for me, though, I only have a pre-foreclosure list that I keep track separate than everything else. And I'll show you what it looks like. And this is basically an example of what it looks like. It's got these particular ones. The owner is living at that address because I don't have a mailing street or a mailing city. So these are owner oct, they're not tenant oct. And so on the right is last scheduled auction date. And I'm constantly mailing to this list, constantly emailing to this list. And so one of the things that we do, and we do it as we speak. Oh, I don't know if you can see me. Can you guys see me? I'm holding up postcards. We literally send, I'll show you this when I get into the charts, but I literally mail to these guys every 6 weeks. I think Danica's on here. Danica used to work for us and she was the person doing it. Now Sarah's going to start to do it. Right now, Heather's doing it. So we do this pretty consistent to our list that I've been creating for 15 years. And it's got about 1,500 records in it. Okay, pre-foreclosure strategies. Okay, this is what you guys are here for, right? Canvass the online foreclosure sales, right? That's probably the easiest way to do it. Public notice, Virginia.com is one. Maryland, each state has its own website. Go find it and figure out where it is. Search the county, city, parish, courthouse for substitute trustee or foreclosure filings. That's another good way to do it. If you don't have somebody sitting at the courthouse steps like none of us do, that's a good way. Take a trip down to your public land records, understand how it works, get used to this kind of thing. This is a lot of work doing this. This is not, you got to be relentless. Understand the foreclosing instrument, right? It could be a loan, lien, or judgment that's foreclosing on it. So understand, is it a second trust? Is it a first trust, first loan, second loan, whatever you call it in your state? Determine if the property has equity. I kind of showed you that through the identification process. Market to the lead and try and buy it before auction. But just because the auction gets canceled and they ignore your pre-foreclosure stuff, just put them on your pre-foreclosure list and continue to mail to them. If the auction is canceled, add it to your database and continue to market to them. Now, some folks are going to get mad at you, and that's okay. If they get mad at you, then just take them off, just take them off the list, and that's no problem. Also, too, if the property has changed hands, if the deed has changed hands, that's another reason to get them off your list. So and the way you know that is because if you're sending out mailers and it comes back as whatever address on the mailer is at another address, well, that should tell you what you need to know. You're going to need to either update their new mailing address or go back and see if that property has changed deeds. And then if it's changed deeds, then just get it off your list because it's no longer a pre-foreclosure candidate because the new owner owns it. Okay, I'm almost done. This isn't bad. I'll probably have about 10 minutes for questions. What do? We defined a pre-foreclosure. I told you how to purchase it. I went over the purchase steps, taught you how to identify what a pre-foreclosure is, I went through a couple of deal examples that you guys hopefully can follow and, write it down and follow it through the MLS. And then I also told you some data collection techniques, which is really the most important part of this topic, believe it or not. Key takeaways, understand the lifestyle of foreclosure. We talked about that at the beginning. It starts off as a pre-foreclosure. If they don't bring it currently, the auction gets canceled. It does go to a foreclosure auction at the courthouse steps usually. And then if it goes back to the bank, it becomes REO, real estate owned. So understand the life cycle of a foreclosure. There's many ways to find the pre-foreclosures. We cover the legal sale, the legal trustee sale advertisements in the legal section of the paper. We covered the substitute trustee notices in the land records at the courthouse steps. And we covered a couple of different ways to find them. And then basically the most important thing that you need to take out of here is create your own distressed marketplace for yourself. Separate yourself from your competition. For us, this is who we are, right? We created this accelerator course called Roadmap to Wealth. We've got about $100 million that we have managed in assets. And so this is one of our accelerator programs that we offer to students. Weekly live training call, private monthly one-on-one calls with me and Ed and Sam, whoever you want it with. We have a bunch of roadmap wealth courses we've created that are out there. And so this is basically what we do. These are the actual courses that we've created. And the one that you really care about is how to find distressed assets. On July, I think it's July the 18th, I'm actually going to be doing most of that course. And so that course is very, very valuable. That's why people like us, because we teach folks how to actually go after distressed assets. And that's basically who we are. And so if you guys have any questions, this is the time for it, because Sarah might kick us off in 12 minutes.
Well, Charlie, if they want to also know more information in more detail, they are welcome to join us for your free presentation that you are doing on July 18th. We put our website where you can go ahead and register for that. The space is limited so make sure that you register right away for that. We do have a question from Rebecca Smith. Her question is, what is your primary way to market to pre-foreclosures in Maryland?
Okay, so Maryland, that's a good question. So in Maryland, our primary way is a couple things. Number one, we send marketing. Just here, now that I have, can you guys see this? We do believe in we still love the postcards, right? We like that. That gets us especially the yellow one. We also do email campaigns. We also keep track of cell phone numbers and phone numbers on various websites because we skip trace it. So we have 3 levels of skip tracing. We have a free level of skip tracing, which is either thatsthem.com, right? And then we have a next level, which is $2 a file, IDI core that we use to skip trace. And then if I really, really need to find somebody, I'll pay a paralegal who has legal services. We'll pay them about $100 a file to skip trace for us. So we have 3 levels of skip tracing. So I still like the mailers. And I know technology doesn't make sense, but I love the mailers. I have a landing page on my mailer. Our landing page is soldin2days.com. And so that's my landing page. We drive leads to that landing page through SEO as well, site engine optimization. But that's the way we market for properties in Maryland, but also phone calls, emails. And so you got to triangulate them. One size doesn't fit all. Mail, email, text message. A lot of people like to respond to text messages, especially if you got their cell phones. A lot of sites now on the skip trace will provide cell phones. And that's a good way to keep track of your data. If the email address bounces or the phone doesn't work, just get rid of it. Right. So that's how we do that. Any other questions?
I love that you say that, because I think sometimes people are so in their head about creating these lists. And it's like, you know what, if it's bouncing, if it's not working, take it out. It doesn't matter if you have 2,000 names in there, if they're, junk. We do have 2 more questions. The first one is there a way to do a title search out of title company time? I think Charlie did talk about that. There is a cost, as far as I know, to be able to do to access land records, and you have to know how to do these title searches.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know and you miss something like IRS lien or a judgment, you'll be responsible to pay for it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things I really need to stress is what you just said, but also to, even if you're pulling your own title search, you also, once you're under contract, you still have got to have a title company pull that same title search for you because they got to underwrite it and they got to provide title insurance. So you're doing this two things. If you're going to do it yourself, first of all, you got to learn how to do it. It took me a long time to learn how to do it. And I had a title attorney teach me how to do it in the various courthouses because they're all different. And if the name is if the name is a common name, I wouldn't recommend doing it at all. But if you do pull your own, you're also going to have a title company pull their own title abstract too, because they got to undersure it. So just be careful. This isn't something for the beginners. This is something that's a little bit more expert investor. This isn't, like I said, this is for the beginners, but we just happen to do it ourselves. Just because sometimes I need to get speed to close, and that's really vital for us.
Yeah, and depending on where the property is, as a title company, we can get you that title work in a very, very short turnaround. It just depends on where that courthouse is. As Charlie said, I mean, I can tell you that I've worked with investors where they have gone ahead and not done the title search or done it themselves, and then they come to us for closing, and we're like, hey, did you know that this has a, if they're being, especially if they're being, Charlie, you were talking about doing one of your sales where it was the HOA lien who was foreclosing. Well, since it was Virginia, in a foreclosure, anything under that gets wiped out, but not above it.
Right.
So you're buying that property with the two loans ahead of them and whatever else got registered before then. So just be very careful about that. Now you have
so remember, you're buying the house from the owner. We're not talking about bidding at a house at a foreclosure auction. We're buying the house from the owner. So all liens come into play.
Yeah.
Every single lien.
So Shay is asking, can you talk more about the 1,000 to sign contract? Is it legal in all of DMV with the short turnaround time that you're doing the title search? How do you close without a title company being involved?
That's a great question. And I was going to say we don't close without a title company being involved, but that's not a true statement. I'll cover this example here in a second. We've never got in trouble with the $1,000 thing. But again, most homeowners don't really ask for it. They just sign the contract and we close 2 days later. So, or a week later. So we really have never run into that. One time I did close a deal without a title company involved, and that was a pre-foreclosure that had a subject to on it, and that we had to close it fairly quick. And so what we did is we met the homeowner at a bank, gave him a $10,000 cashier check. I then wired, $44,000 to the substitute trustee to cancel the auction, had him sign the deed, and then we did a subject to on the loan. And then we went ahead and recorded the deed once he notarized and signed the deed. So I've done that once or twice. I would not recommend it. Again, if you're doing this kind of thing, you had better have an investor-friendly title company on your side. I would not recommend what we did, because remember, I do have owner's insurance. I have title insurance on the loan that we did a subject to on, but technically we do not have owner's title insurance. So that particular case, it was a house in Culpeper. We got it for, I think, $250. The house was worth $375. Did a subject to on a VHDA loan where the interest rate was like 3.5%. It's now a rental. And so then what you could do is then get owner's title insurance from a title company after the fact. So we did have to go and manually record the deed, pay the recording fees and all that. But I would not recommend it. But that's probably one of the only times you'll do it if you have. I wouldn't do it.
Not that, but the title company is also going to do their due diligence to make sure that seller is who they are. And once they issue owner's title insurance, if there was any fraud, that title insurance will protect you. Whereas if you go and do the deed by yourself and then get owner's title insurance, it's not going to protect you for that kind of fraud. Okay, Carla is asking, do you guys also do assigned contracts on homes that allow you to have weeks to close?
You mean, do we buy assigned contracts or are we assigning the contract? I'll cover both. Well, the first one is we're not wholesalers, so I guess I've assigned a few contracts to our end user hard money buyers. So I guess I've done that in assignment. But as far as us, we'll buy houses from assignments from folks. But I mean, it doesn't have to be 2 or 3 weeks. We could close in, as long as if the abstract is back, we close in less than 24 hours. I mean, it just depends, right? But then again, you guys are putting pressure on your title companies. Not all title companies will do this. And so the stuff that I'm talking about is because of long relationships that we've had with folks. And so don't think that your title company is going to jump through hoops for you if you're not providing them business. You got to provide them a lot of business. And then they'll start doing it, right? This doesn't happen every day, right? So I don't want to put undue pressure on Sarah's team because pulling title for somebody in 2 or 3 days, this isn't normal. So you have to understand we were operating in an environment that's not normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Any other questions for Charlie?
Well, there's a one in the chat that discusses the new law in
Oh.
VA regarding pre-foreclosures. I don't know about that law, but there's a new law in Virginia regarding wholesalers. Is that what you meant, Shay? The new wholesaler law in Virginia?
Yes, I got confused. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. So what do I have a few minutes, Sarah, on this?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened is as of July the 1st, Virginia passed a new law that says if you're going to wholesale, and the key word is more than 2 properties in Virginia, you have to have your real estate license. That's starting July the 1st. Okay, now there's ways to get around it. Okay, way number 1, use a lender like us, Clear Sky Financial, to do what's called a transactional loan and do a double close. Okay, so you're going to own it for a day or 2, sell it to your cash buyer 2 days later, whatever. Then you own it for a day or 2. That's the way to get around number 1. Number 2, if you're going to buy the property as a wholesaler, buy it in a single use entity LLC name. Let's say it's 1234 Main Street LLC. Then what you're going to do is you're going to simply sell the LLC. That's how you avoid the licensed law in Virginia that starts July the 1st. So keep that in mind. I think that's what you want to know. Sarah, you got anything else to add on that?
I mean, I think that you have to be careful because, of course, with every loophole, there's consequences such as taxes or what you can or cannot deduct afterwards. I think it's, I think that it's definitely interesting how they have passed these laws. And I don't know if there's going to be some pushback about it.
Right.
But if you want to learn more, I am going to just encourage everybody that you should register for the class that Charlie is going to be teaching on July 18th from 10 to 1 on how to find distressed assets. As well, he's going to have his book, of course, Roadmap to Wealth. It's a great way of building wealth. I think that if you are wanting to do, build wealth this way, educate yourself.
Yeah.
Come to these trainings. We are very incredibly grateful to have Charlie with his wealth of expertise and experience to be here and be so honest and generous about everything that it's taking him a lot of money and time in order to learn. So we really appreciate that. We appreciate you, Charlie, so much. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. We will send the recording in our newsletter. So if you're not signed up for a newsletter, make sure you do because it's going to come out the first week of July. And I am so excited to see you guys on July 18th. No, the presentation for July 18th will probably not be streamlined. It is going to be in person. If there is interest for us to be doing it in some sort of more, virtual way, we'll talk to Charlie and see how we can achieve that. You can sign up through our newsletter, through our website as well. Just go and say, sign up for our newsletter, or you can always email us to that info@titantitlemetro.com. We are here to help you. Charlie and the Clear Sky team, thank you so much for this incredible, presentation. And I am so excited to see what your next presentation is going to be.
Thank you. And I hope you guys learned something.
Oh, I did. Thank you guys. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.